What I wanted to do was some panoramas for you tonight. And here's one that you would think is just going to be a mess. And it would have been. In fact, here's all the pieces of it down below. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to reset it. Just so you can see, this is what these looked like. And if I go to the basic panel, what did I do? Basically the same thing. But I also had masks for the foreground and sky. But let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do it after the fact. Now the beauty is now in Lightroom, you can do your DNG denoising on a pano, as long as it says pano DNG there. So that's what the pano looked like after I stitched it together. Gee, can something like that be saved? You would think. And the answer is, well, obviously, because if not, I wouldn't be doing this. Let's do the same thing. Let's bring down the highlights, open up the shadows. Could I go back to one of my standard presets? Sure, let's go to presets. Let's see. And you can see I can just scroll through these. Oh, actually, here's the one we just created. That's a little too light. You know what? The January 29 we did is a good starting point. Let's work with it. So first thing, the foreground, too dark. How do we get to the foreground? We select the sky. Select the sky, and then we invert it. So if we click on the three dots, tell it invert. There we go. Let's bring up the exposure here. There we go. That's looking better. Now it's looking weird because the sky's dark. And that's okay. Hold on. Hold on. Be right. We'll get this fixed. We'll break the darks, the shadows a little, the blacks a little darker. Actually, I'm going to bring the shadows down a smidge because we're going to have to deal. There's some weird light going on. These are the mittens, by the way, these two things. Let's do the sky now. So let's create a new mask. This time we'll do the sky, and let's bring the sky exposure up so that it now makes sense to the foreground. There we go. That's all that needed. All right. Actually, I'm pretty happy with that. There's too much sky to the foreground. Again, not a problem. Let's hit enter on that. What does it need? Once again, when you're dealing with the foreground, you want to lead somebody into the image. Notice this all has the same color tone, this leading up into the monuments. That's not helpful because it gives as much visual power down here as it does to the subjects. So we're going to do an M again, the graduated linear filter, and I'm going to click and drag up because we don't want the color to be the same because then everything looks the same. We need to create some dimension in this. So I'm going to make it bluer and then bring up the exposure a bit. And as I do that, I'm going to make it greener too. It's not really making it green, it's taking magenta out. And then lastly, I'm going to take a little saturation out. And as I do that, I think it needs a little dehaze. We need to darken the foreground up a little bit, and that should do a nice job. And that does. All right, now the sky is obviously a problem. It's way too big. Let's go to a standard size in our crop. Let's cut to the chase. And if I click on original, 2:1 is a standard size. Let's see if 2:1 is enough. And no, it's not. It's still too tall because this is a very narrow shot. So let's go to 3:1. And we're going really panorama here. But strangely enough, 3:1 is a standard frame. You can buy this in Hobby Lobby or Michael's. It's actually a 12 by 36. It's a standard frame size there. All right, so how else can we add some life to this? Let's start by adding some contrast, and just that gets things on the way. But this thing over here is called the West Mitten, and for some reason it's gone a little orange, a little too orange. So let's go to 50% magnification so we can see this a little better. Oh, it gives you a sense of scale too. We got one car there in the valley. But the light was kind of weird at this point, so we need to deal with it separately. Let's get a brush, K. And again, the base, this thing is just way too orange, so we're going to have to take away some of that. Actually, the whole thing's a little too orange. Some of the colors were a little strange while we were out there because it had been wet, And sometimes when the rocks get wet, they do take on some stranger colors. Let's bring up the exposure, and it needs blue and some green, and it needs some desaturation. Yeah, it's looking more what it looked like. But now while we're there, let's add some contrast, bring the exposure up a bit, and we need to add to the blacks. All right, we're getting close. Now we need to do some light painting on it by itself. So again, a K. And we're going to add a little shape to this thing. So where is it darker? Let's look at all of the mittens. This thing's called Merrick Butte. So you see the sun is coming from the right. Yet this one, for some reason, maybe because of the way the clouds were, didn't get it. So let's go ahead, and on the left side of it, we're going to make this area darker. So we'll bring down the exposure there. That's looking better. In fact, we'll do the same thing for the east mitten rather. That's the east mitten back there. And we're going to make believe that there's some more clouds in the air. That was too much. I could do two things. I could start again, or I can now bring the flow down on the mask brush. Yeah, that's better. And then it lets us paint in individual places that we think need a little darkening. And these are both dark enough, so we're going to actually lighten them, the other two monuments, up. So let's hit enter on that and hit K again. Now we're going to paint on the right side, which we know is the side that the sun's coming from. And we're going to do it on both of these features. And let's bring up the exposure here. So what we're doing is we're just creating some more light, but it's going to add dimension to the whole scene. All right, so let's go full screen. Okay. I don't think I'm thrilled with the sky. So let's go up to here again. And do I have a sky one? Yeah, here's our sky. Let's go to the sky and the color. I don't know, the color's off. What does it need? If I add blue, if I add yellow, definitely not yellow. Let's add some blue to it. But you know, I think it's going to be time. I think it's time to go into Photoshop with this. And again, this is something we're going to explore more next week. But let's send this into Photoshop. So I'm going to hit Command E, which will send this image into Photoshop. Now, I didn't have Photoshop open, so Photoshop is going to first open, and then it will open this particular image. So any questions while that is opening? No. All right. You guys are quiet tonight. Hey, everybody. This is actually a little bit of an extra sidebar. I didn't get to do this because Photoshop was giving me a hard time when I was trying to record. But I wanted to show you one of the tools in Photoshop that would allow you to fix when the color just, you know there's something wrong, but you're not sure what it is. And that's the color balance tool. And to get to that, in the Layers panel, click on the little half circle over here and choose Color Balance. And that brings up this menu. And you see you have a lot more choices for color adjustments than you do in Lightroom. And we've got midtones, highlights, and shadows. So we get to do those three different adjustments separately. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit on the image so we can see kind of the tones a little better. Maybe back off a little. And I'm going to start with midtones and drag the sliders back and forth. So we go to cyan to red. Now this is somewhat subjective, but you know, I think I want a little more cyan. Magenta green. Does it need magenta? No. Does it need green? Yeah, it needs green. So we'll add green. Now yellow, blue. Oh no, it needed a lot of blue. Look at that. Blue looks a lot better. All right, that's good. Let's move on to highlights. We'll do the same thing. Slide back and forth. Does it need cyan? Does it need magenta, or a little bit of each? This one's a little bit more subjective. I'm going to go a little bit cyan just for mood. Magenta green. Green, no. Magenta, yes. It needed some magenta. So we'll go there. And then yellow, no. Blue, oh man, blue. Look at that. Blue really helps it. That's the way I remember the place that day. And then lastly, shadows. So cyan, ooh, that looks good. No, the red's too much. I think we're going cyan on our shadows too. Red, green, red, green. They're kind of tough. Maybe a slight bit of red, slight bit of magenta. And then yellow, blue. Ooh, loving what the blue's doing to it. So we're going to add some blue to the shadows as well. And just by doing that, even the sky looks better. We turn this on and off, and look at the difference in the color. That color there, hate to say it, but it's a lot better. And we go to full screen. Let's just see this. Yep, I like that a lot better. Now, that's not the final crop either. We come out of that. In fact, I cropped this in Lightroom, but let's go ahead and crop it while we're here in Photoshop. And let me just take a look at it on and off one more time. Now, as I do that, I think maybe I want a smidge darker. Let's add a little more contrast to it. I'm going to go to Curves, and I'm going to put a point in the middle, 3/4 down and 3/4 up. And I'm going to darken the shadows a bit by dragging this down. And let's see, do the highlights need to be up? That just makes it a little more contrasty. Actually, that's kind of attractive. And let's see, we turn that on and off. Yeah, it just adds a little bit more pop. And wow, look at the difference between there and there. And I think that's the answer. So we'll explore this more in some upcoming classes, but there you go. That's one of the most powerful tools to fix color in an image when Lightroom just can't do it for you. You know there's something wrong, the color balance adjustment will allow you to do that. And the fact that it's in Photoshop, you can also isolate where it's going to happen. So just as a for example, if I go back in here and select the sky, let's say, for example, let's just say for argument's sake, I didn't want this applied to the sky. If I click on where the color balance mask is right here, I've got black in the foreground. I can hit Alt or Option Backspace, and it gets rid of that from the sky. And you can see there, and now it's only affecting the foreground. And if you Alt-click on the mask, you can see that's how it's doing the masking on that. And we'll cover this again in more detail. I think I like a little bit of it on the sky as well. And something else you can do is actually click on the mask and bring the opacity of the mask down. So if I bring the mask opacity down, it will let more or all of it through. I can see, drag left to right, and you can see what happens color-wise. And maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I kind of like it about right there. And hit OK. And we'll go full screen again. And there we go. Yeah, I think that's the answer. So there's a little bit of the color balance adjustments in Photoshop, and we'll cover this more in our color class. Thanks for your patience.